Ekweremadu believes one term is enough for any politician. 7 die from greenhouse gases in Nnewi. In international news, Trump defiant says hush money came from me. And in sports, Chris Giwa commends Buhari DeLong for resolving NFF crisis.
This is ANN News.
I am Rotimi Akintunde. Nigeria's Deputy Senate President Ike Ekweremadu has reiterated his call for Nigeria to embrace single terms for those occupying political positions at the state and federal levels. Ekweremadu said on Wednesday on his Facebook page that Nigeria's political atmosphere was getting toxic ahead of next year's general elections and governance is taking the back seat. He said incumbents who were largely unable to resist the temptation that goes with their current positions try desperately to retain power at all costs. The Deputy Senate President says the country's feverish political climate justifies the call for a single presidential or governorship term of 5 or 6 years. As the Deputy Senate President calls for single terms, Foreign Affairs Minister Geoffrey Onyeama says the international community strongly supports President Muhammadu Buhari's second-term bid. Onyeama said Nigeria, under President Buhari, had been enjoying the goodwill of international community to the extent that they are supportive of his second-term bid. A statement drew outrage from Yoruba socio-political organization Afenifere, a former lawmaker, and People's Democratic Party PDP. They all say the poor performance of the present government would not elicit the support of the international community. Afenifere challenged him to name the country supporting Buhari's second-term bid. The People's Democratic Party PDP also responded to the minister, saying his statement was delusional. Despite pressure by some lobbyists, President Muhammadu Buhari has reportedly ruled out reinstating the sacked Director General of the Department of State Services, DSS, Lawal Dora. Reports say those against Dora's return argued that his sack saved the nation's democracy and boosted the Buhari's administration's democratic credentials. The former head of state was reported to have advised the president to ignore influential forces pushing for Dora's return because of the democratic mileage the administration scored with his removal after masked DSS operatives invaded the National Assembly. The People's Democratic Party PDP has described as ominous Tuesday statement by the Miyetti Allah Cattle Breeders Association threatening to force the Senate President Bukola Saraki out of office. The party says Buhari must order the arrest and prosecution of the association's leaders within 24 hours because the group's statement echoed threat by the All Progressives Congress and agents of the presidency to ensure the impeachment of Saraki. PDP's National Publicity Secretary Kola Ologbondiyan was responding to a statement credited to the National Coordinator of the Association in Benue State, Garus Gololo, who said the group will force Saraki out of office if he refused to resign. With a delay by the National Assembly to reconvene and decide on the budget of the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, for next year's election, Chairman of the Presidential Advisory Committee on Corruption, PACAC, Professor Issa Sagi, SAN, says the federal government could fund next year's election by invoking the doctrine of necessity if the lawmakers fail to pass the budget. Sagi said the overriding necessity of elections and survival of democracy supersede the National Assembly's powers where democracy is threatened. He said while the power to approve the budget is only a single item in the 1999 Constitution, the document is about democracy and its processes, including elections. He said failure by the National Assembly to approve funds for next year's election would constitute a sabotage of the country's democracy. 7 persons were reported killed on Tuesday in Anambra State as a result of chemical emissions attributed to burning lignite. Lignite is a brown coal formed from naturally compressed peat that sends out gas with irritating sulfurous odor. That emission allegedly sent many residents of Umuzumbana, Otolo Nnewi North Local Government area to the hospital. President General of the community, Tony Mudielo, said the incident was first discovered in December. He added that the team of geologists from a university in the state discovered that there was a dangerous chemical deposited at the site, with recommendations that government should urgently stop the fire to save the community from further exposure to dangerous chemical. Obviously, that was never done. New data have shown that the power sector has lost more than 300 billion naira this year because of gas constraints and a poor distribution network. It has been reported that the sector lost more than 1 billion naira even as recently as Monday because of gas unavailability, poor distribution and transmission network, as well as high frequency when 3,700 megawatts of electricity could not be generated. Executive Secretary, Association of Power Generation Companies, APGC, Joy Ogaji, warned of likely nationwide blackout over the inability of the Transmission Company of Nigeria, TCN, to transmit the available volume of electricity generated into the national grid. Meanwhile, TCN says it may consider public-private partnership PPP arrangement in the mix of options available to it to upgrade the capacity of Nigeria's national grid. In business news, Brent oil rose to $74 a barrel on Wednesday as report shows a drop in U.S. crude inventories. U.S. sanctions against OPEC producer Iran also tightened supplies. American Petroleum Institute says U.S. crude stocks fell last week by 5 million barrels, more than 3 times the decline analysts suspected. They say API inventory data published after the closing of trading yesterday lended buoyancy to prices. Oil also found support from a weak dollar, which has slipped this week in response to U.S. President Donald Trump's comment that he was not thrilled by the Federal Reserve's interest rate increases. The prospect of a drop in oil export from Iran in response to new U.S. sanctions is also supporting the market. The federal government has stopped the issuance of visas to foreigners seeking to take up jobs in the country. The president explained in Abuja on Wednesday that the visa restriction to foreign engineers enforced by the Ministry of Interior was in compliance with Executive Order 5 signed by him. He said the decision would free up more jobs for Nigerians and improve local content, adding that the government was serious about the order and would ensure strict adherence to it. Vice President Yemi Osinbajo has said the federal government will extend its different loan projects to more low and medium entrepreneurs in the country. Osinbajo spoke at a town hall meeting in Bariga Shomolu area of Lagos State. He also said the government has created an enterprise and empowerment program, a microcredit scheme for market women and others, assuring citizens that the government is willing to support traders, artisans, mechanics and others. He said because the majority of the workers were at a very low level doing little things, the government must focus and support them so that the poorest can do better. The third mainland bridge in Lagos will be closed for a 3-day maintenance test beginning at midnight. The test is being jointly carried out by the Federal Ministry of Power, Works and Housing and Lagos State Government. Relevant authorities have assured residents of free flow of traffic and have urged motorists to comply with traffic rules and directional signs to alternative routes during the period. Lagos State Commissioner for Work, Ade Akinsanya, says the temporary closure would enable contractors to assess the state of the bridge before work would commence by the end of this year. Still ahead, major news across Africa. And later, Trump reacts to his legal blows, says hush money is legal.
You are watching ANN.
MTN gives 2,000% bonus for reactivating your MTN SIM. That's right. If you haven't used your MTN SIM for 45 days or more, recharge now and get 2,000% bonus. That's right, 2,000% bonus for your first recharge of every month.
Whether in your house, at your office, on your phone or online, we are there. We have the facts behind the headlines. We cut to the chase with the news you really need. We cover every angle. We are the bigger, better news network. We are African News Network. ANN. Watch ANN News on MITV from a truly African spirit.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. Now to some African stories. A Tripoli local official says at least 4 security personnel were killed and 7 injured in a gun attack by suspected militants at a checkpoint east of the Libyan capital on Thursday. The attack took place between the towns of Lytton and Combs on the coastal road leading east from Tripoli. The mayor of Zlitin, Miftah Hamadi, said there were 3 assailants in the deadly attack targeting a checkpoint. 1 died and 2 escaped. The first approached the checkpoint in a car and went on foot to launch the attack using guns, hand grenades and knives. A witness said 3 security personnel had their throat slit. IS lost its major stronghold in central Libya nearly 2 years ago. Since then, its fighters have carried out deadly attacks on checkpoints in the country. Islamic State militants have imposed heavy taxes on traders and companies in northeast Somalia in what seems to be an attempt to match revenue collection tactics of rival Islamist militant group Al-Shabaab. IS sent threatening text messages to traders and businesses instructing them to pay a permanent amount of taxation fees or risk death. The group has also increased attacks against government forces in southern Somalia, a development that may have informed its move to impose taxes in the semi-autonomous northeastern state of Puntland. The militant group's expansion into southern Somalia makes a confrontation with Al-Shabaab inevitable. Armed groups in Central African Republic have presented nearly 100 demands, including a general amnesty to an African Union AU expert panel seeking to broker peace in the country. The demands, including a government of national unity, will go along with the amnesty and a restructuring of the army. The AU has been leading a peace process in the Central African Republic, but there has been little progress. Central African Republic descended into violence in 2013 following the ouster of the majority Christian country's president Francois Bozize by a coalition of Muslim majority rebel groups called the Salika. The leader behind an insurgency in the Republic of Congo, Frederick Bensamom, also known as Pastor Tumi, accepted on Tuesday the principle of laying down arms in his first public appearance since he agreed to a ceasefire in December. Frederick Bensamom is head of a powerful militia called the Ninjas, which launched a revolt in April 2016 in the southern region of Po, prompting more than 138,000 people to flee their homes. The ceasefire deal with the government has been touted as laying the groundwork for peace. In it, Bensamom committed to getting the combatants to lay down and submit their arms, but he did not follow up, saying he opposed unilateral disarmament. A human rights group is urging Libyan authorities to maintain a de facto moratorium on executions after 45 persons were sentenced to death last week for their involvement in violence during the 2011 uprisings. Eric Goldstein of Human Rights Watch said on Wednesday a judiciary that is in shambles has no business sentencing defendants to death by the dozens. Last Wednesday, a Libyan court sentenced 45 people to die by firing squad in a case that dates back to August 2011, when longtime dictator Muammar Gaddafi's forces clashed with rebels in the capital Tripoli. Another 54 persons were sentenced to 5 years in prison and 22 were acquitted. Gaddafi was overthrown and killed in two months after the clashes. Libya is now split between rival governments, each backed by an array of militias. South Africa's government has rejected United States President Donald Trump's tweet on land reform, calling it a narrow perception that divides the nation. The government, in an official tweet on Thursday, says it totally rejects Trump's perception, which only seeks to divide the nation and remind South Africa of its colonial past. Trump said on Wednesday he had asked Secretary of State Mike Pompeo to closely study the South African land and farm seizures and the killing of farmers there. This has prompted Pretoria to accuse Trump of stoking racial divisions. President Cyril Ramaphosa had announced earlier this month the ruling African National Congress, ANC, is forging ahead with plans to change the constitution to allow the expropriation of land without compensation. Whites still own most of South Africa's land more than 2 decades after the end of apartheid. Trump's tweet comes days after it was announced that his wife Melania will travel to Africa in October for her first major solo international trip as First Lady. Ethiopian authorities say 8 people have died and thousands have been displaced following heavy rains that have hit several parts of the country. National Disaster Risk Management Commission says mudslides in the country's northwest caused the deaths. Flooding and mudslides also affected some parts of eastern and southern Ethiopia. More than 20 people have been saved by the military after raging waters marooned their homes. One of the victims said he has never seen anything like that in recent years. Coming up, Trump claims paying to silence porn stars is legal, and later, Chris Giwer's comments on NFF settled crisis.
You are watching ANN.
Are you sure you want to do this?
Adam, go and bring us your husband. Okay, hello baby. We're in this together, okay? Can you hear me? Keep coming forward. Wait, stop. You okay, lean to your right. Keep walking down, keep walking to the left. Yes. You're almost here. Keep going. You are here. Wow, you did it.
I'm just so glad I didn't have to use my cane to do this.
And I am so glad no other man got you before me. Let me be your eyes.
We will never stop working to give you a network you can rely on so you can enjoy life's special moments. MTN, everywhere you go.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. On the international scene, U.S. President Donald Trump has insisted that payments to silence 2 women who claim he had affairs with them did not break election campaign rules. Trump made the assertion after his former lawyer Michael Cohen pleaded guilty to violating campaign finance laws when he made the hush money payments to the 2 women during the 2016 presidential election campaigns. Trump says the money was from him personally and not from the campaign, a rather different version from his original denial of knowing about one of the payments. Trump has also accused Cohen of making up stories so that he can have his sentence reduced. One of the audio tapes seized by the independent counsel from Cohen's office in July had him and Trump allegedly discussing one of the payments before the election.
But you have to understand, Ainsley, what he did, and they weren't taken out of campaign finance. That's a big thing. That's a much bigger thing. Did they come out of the campaign? They didn't come out of the campaign. They came from me, and I tweeted about it. You know, I don't know if you know, but I tweeted about the payments. But they didn't come out of campaign. In fact, my first question when I heard about it was, did they come out of the campaign? Because that could be a little dicey. And they didn't come out of the campaign, and that's big.
One Republican member of the House has broken ranks with Trump, saying he can no longer believe anything that comes out of the president's mouth. It's been a tough week for the American president. The United Nations and China escalated their trade war today by implementing 25% tariffs and $16 billion worth of goods from both countries. Experts say this trade war is a risk to global economic growth. President Donald Trump has threatened to impose duties on almost all of the more than $500 billion of Chinese goods exported to the U.S. annually unless Beijing agrees to sweeping changes to its intellectual property practices, industrial subsidy programs, and tariff structures. He also wants the Asian giant to buy more U.S. goods. China could also retaliate by making life difficult for American firms in China. A female activist, Isra Al-Ghomgham, is facing death penalty in Saudi Arabia for participating in and documenting sheer anti-government protest. If convicted, she could become the first female activist ever beheaded in the kingdom Israel and her husband and 5 other activists are facing execution over charges relating to their involvement in protest with a group affiliated with an enemy state calling for more rights for 2 million Shia Muslims and posting it online. It was Israel's first time in court after 2 years in detention. The prosecutor wants death penalties for her husband, and 3 others. Israel has approved plans to build more than 1,000 illegal settlement homes in the occupied West Bank. It is the latest in the raft of approvals since U.S. President Donald Trump assumed office. A non-government organization, Peace Now, NGO, has closely monitored the settlement building and reported about 400 homes have been approved for construction. 96% of those approved are in isolated settlement that Israel would have to evacuate within the framework of a 2-state agreement. The government also plans to develop hundreds more housing units. Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull has said he would hold a leadership vote on Friday if he received a letter signed by the majority of the ruling Liberal Party members. Turnbull won a vote on Tuesday against former Home Affairs Minister Peter Dutton, but senior ministers are calling for a second ballot. The Prime Minister says if he receives a letter requesting a fresh vote and a leadership spill motion was passed, he would not stand in the vote. 3 of his senior ministers have also resigned and now back his opponent. If Dutton's supporters succeed, Turnbull will be ousted without completing his 3 years in power, and whoever replaces him will become Australia's 7th Prime Minister in a decade. Up next, sports. Chris Giwa reacts to NFF resolved crisis.
You are watching ANN.
If you know fit go internet or follow for Twitter, you know fit snap photo send or get it photo send. Now because you dey use Palasa, your phone no dey answer. See me see wahala. My brother, go get smartphone, yeah. Drop that Palasa phone. Phone wey no go for your hand, yeah. Drop that Palasa phone. Phone wey no fit take selfie. Drop that Palasa phone. No be correct phone, yeah. Drop that Palasa phone.
Upgrade to a smartphone today and get double data for 6 months on any MTN data bundle you buy. Simply purchase a smartphone from any store, anywhere in Nigeria, or bring your current smartphone from any network. Insert your MTN SIM card to start enjoying your double data bonus. Offer is open to all new and existing MTN subscribers. Join the largest smartphone movement today.
Make it not for your hand,
While the world sleeps, ANN News stays awake. News takes no time off. We are awake so you can sleep. We report the stories that keep you up to date, events that affect your day, your week, month, and experiences. We scour the world, bringing it to your living room. Watch ANN News in a truly African spirit. Welcome back. This is ANN News. In sports, Chris Giwa has commended President Muhammadu Buhari for resolving lingering crisis in the Nigeria Football Federation. Giwa also lauded the efforts of the Minister of Youth and Sport Development, Solomon Dalong, for standing by the rule of law and defending the Constitution. Chris Giwa reaffirms in his statement that he is still the legally recognized board of the NFF, based on the orders of the Supreme Court in April. It looks like the Nigeria Football Federation have chosen the Ahmadu Bello Stadium in Kaduna as the venue for the Super Eagles African Nations Cup qualifier against Libya. Nigeria will travel to Seychelles next month for their second match of the qualifying series and come back home to face Libya in the third game. The Super Eagles lost to South Africa in their opening game in the series in Uyo last year. That is ANN News this evening. Thank you for joining us. For details on these and other stories, visit our website, annafrica.net. Conversation continues on our social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at ANN Africa TV. I am Rotimi Akintunde. Have a great evening.